so great to see so many gals here, to be back here. For those of you who remember me 20 years ago, you'll see that I have changed. My granddaughter and I were sitting next to each other in Chicago. She's 9 years old, and she said, "Grandma, your neck is falling." I said, "Well, you're a really smarty little girl. Too bad you're no longer in the will, but you know." But when Sylvia said she was premenopausal and Kay said she was menopausal, I thought, isn't menopause wonderful? I mean, when we go through, when we're adolescents and we start to change, our mom says, "Oh, honey, you're just becoming a woman." But when you go through menopause, nobody tells you what's going to happen. And I never dreamed that I would begin to look like my father. It's not fair, is it? For those of you who have never heard of me, I thought I would tell you up front that I'm a famous person. How many of you remember an Olympic swimmer named Janet Evans from Placentia, California, won 5 gold medals for the United States of America? Remember when she carried the torch up to Muhammad Ali at the Olympic Games, and her arm was kind of, I mean, his arm was just sort of shaking as he took that to light the cauldron? Well, her father is my kitty's veterinarian. And this has sort of opened doors for me around the world, and I think that's how they got my name. He's also a taxidermist. There's a sign over his door that says, "Either way, you get your pet back." But you see, a few years ago, my husband went through the change of life. I'm so glad it wasn't the change of wife. But he said, "Honey, you're traveling a lot, and I think, you know, I'm lonely. I want to get a dog." Well, I was thinking more like a facelift, but anyway, he went ahead and got a dog, and he got a Welsh Terrier. It looks like a little Airedale, and we named him Pistol Pete. And he came into our lives and ungardened our beautiful backyard, and he dug a hole in our heart, and now we love him more than world peace. And I was in Chicago at my daughter's one time, and I was called home to my husband, and he said, "Honey, say hello to Petey." I said, "Oh, honey, no, he'll love it. Just say hello to him." So I went in the other room and went, "Hi, Petey. Hi, Petey, it's Mommy. And I just love my Peter Pan dog, and you're just so sweet, and I just love you so much." And my daughter walked up behind me. She said, "I hope you and Dad have a lot of money, because I'm not taking care of you." We have gone around the bend with that dog, let me tell you. Well, we're going to talk about expectations this afternoon, and do they satisfy? Recently, well, actually, it was a few years ago, I read an article in the newspaper about expectations, and it said that they're not simply predictions of what will happen to us, it's what we want to have happen. And if what we want to have happen actually is something we can live out, it really does take place, then we don't have a problem with our expectations. But unfortunately, I have found that there's usually a huge discrepancy between expectations and real experience. I don't know about you, but I expected something totally different out of life than what I got. And I'd like to just take a few minutes here to share with you some of the ridiculous expectations I've had of my life. And when I was a little girl, people said I had a learning disability. And that's because I loved cleaning house. And my mother never got me any help for that. She just gave me a list, and I became Cinderella. But I was kind of like Sylvia. I was just a controller. I wanted everything to be neat and tidy, and I loved my bedroom. It was kind of my space, you know, and I loved decorating it. And while my friends were getting toys and clothes, I asked for paint and wallpaper. And so my dad painted my bedroom piggy pink, and I had 2 sets of bedspreads, and I had 2 sets of curtains, and I'd interchange those every 6 months, rearrange the furniture, closets all geometrically designed by alphabet. I mean, I was a little tightly wrapped. There's no doubt about it. But you see, it was really kind of the longing of my heart to the day that I could someday own a home of my own, and I could decorate it any way I wanted. I always loved that sort of thing. And from the time I was a little girl, I remember I had a picture of my dream house. You ever had a picture of your dream house? Well, my dream house was a white cottage with a thatched roof. And it was so English, and it had ivy growing everywhere, and the windows were beveled glass, and the shutters were hunter green, and the curtains were those little billowy crisscross curtains, and there was a cobblestone walk, and there was climbing roses and morning glory over an arbor, and it was just so quaint and darling, and it overlooked the sea. Now you can tell I was odd because I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I don't know where I got the picture for that, but it must have been from one of those old movies we now see on the Ted Turner network or something, but I just longed for that. And so after my husband and I were married a few years, we were transferred from Albuquerque, New Mexico to El Paso, Texas. They say happiness is El Paso in your rearview mirror. But I remember when he came home with those 4 little words and said, honey, we've been transferred. I wasn't too disappointed because I thought it was kind of exciting. And so we moved to El Paso and we were able to buy our very first home. And it was a white brick house with hunter green shutters, except it was in the middle of an ashtray called the desert. That was the only thing that was similar to the house I'd always dreamed about. But we got this house all fixed up, the lawns in and everything, and he came home with those 4 little words. Honey, we've been transferred, only this time we were transferred to Southern California. Now, if you've ever lived outside of the state of California, you know that people don't think real highly of us. I mean, they don't think that this is the gold standard for the place to live. They all want to visit here, but they don't want to live here. So I felt that way. I had heard nothing good about California. In fact, I was afraid. I was afraid to move here. I thought, we're going to live next door to Charles Manson. And then we're going to have one of those big riots, and our whole neighborhood will burn down just before the big earthquake, which will crack this state off into the ocean. And I thought my kids would have to go to a lockdown school. I was really afraid. I wasn't even sure God lived out here, you know? And so we put our teeny tiny little Texas house up for sale, and we bought a teeny tiny house in Placentia, California that was a fixer-upper. And I was a little disappointed with that, but as soon as we moved into that house, the neighbors had a block party to welcome us. Lived on a cul-de-sac, met all of our neighbors, instantly fell in love with them, and I learned how to wallpaper, and I painted everything, and I started decorating that house, and it was during that time in my life that I answered the higher call. I learned how to macrame. Now, all the girls that are young here, you've never been able to do that, but it's a special skill. You take a ball of dirty string and you tie knots in it. And you make plant hangers that cover up your teeny tiny fixer-upper home, right? And I just love doing that. And I met these great gals, and I got involved in Christian Women's Club, and I'll never forget when we visited this wonderful church that had a funny name, and the pastor had a funny accent, and his name was Charles Swindoll. And it was at that church that I opened the Bible for the very first time and began to fall in love with so many people at that church, with our pastor and with Jesus. But 8 years later, my husband came home, buzzard, with those 4 little words. Honey, we've been transferred. Transferred? I don't want to move to Denver, Colorado. But that was where my husband was going to have the greatest job that he had walked up that corporate ladder to have. And so I figured if I wanted to stay married, I should probably move with him to Denver.